Mexican woman ghost in my bed. My story takes place in Puerto Penasco, aka Rocky Point in Mexico. Me and my friends decided to take a trip to Rocky Point for spring break in '08. It was just a spur of the moment kind of thing. Well, when we finally got there, we decided to stay in a small hotel called Hotel Arizona. It was not the greatest looking hotel, but the owner offered us a good price, so we had to take it. We decided to unpack and go out and party because when we got there, it was like 9 p.m. After a long night of clubbing, we headed back to the hotel to get some sleep. I would say it was around 3 a.m. when we finally got back. The room was an average sized room with 2 beds in it, which made me and another friend share. I ended up sleeping within a couple of minutes of getting into bed. I'm fast asleep, and I remember something just messing with my face. I finally wake up, thinking it's a mosquito or something. I get on my knees in bed to grab the covers behind me, and when I look straight at the headboard, I see a small Mexican woman in my bed on my pillow. She looked like she was probably in her late 20s or early 30s. I could see her face perfectly. At first, I thought it was an actual person, and I got scared and threw a punch at her because it startled me. But when I swung and hit nothing but air, I knew something was wrong. I jumped out of bed, still looking at it, and it turned into a black ball of mist and disappeared. After that happened, I turned on both the lights and the TV and stayed awake the whole night. And before anyone asked, no, I was not drunk. The Highway Q Phantom. The story dates back a couple of years, at least 3 years back by this point. But I remember the events clear as day. It was during spring break, so somewhere around mid-March. I had driven a friend back to their house in Waukesha and had taken Highway 164 north to where it intersected with Highway Q and turned towards Menominee Falls, where I and the other friend of mine in the car live at. Highway Q is a relatively busy road during the day, but at night, it can be dark and gloomy in between settled areas. We came up to a town of Colgate, which is a really small town. The train tracks are on the east end, and we had just crossed them. We were doing about 45 miles per hour on the stretch between the tracks and Bases Country Market. After Bases, there is an intersection for Town Line Road and a BP station. Memory fails me as to exactly where along that stretch we were, but there was another car coming in the oncoming lane, and I had just switched off my high beams when I noticed a shape in the road ahead. It looked to be a human shape and a regular human height, but just maybe a bit taller. The shape was pure black, and I had enough illumination from the other vehicle coming to notice that I couldn't pick out any distinct features. It didn't walk, no, it moved like it was gliding, and went straight across my lane and into the cornfield on the south side of the road. This was before we crossed Town Line Road. I was carrying on a conversation at the time, and my first instinct was to pause and look. But my friend, who was with me, is extremely sensitive to spirits. I had been really sleep deprived that week, and I didn't want to look like I was completely nuts, so I kept on talking like nothing had happened. About a quarter minute after we had passed, she says, "Did you see that?" I knew at that moment that I had seen my first apparition. We had the heat on in the car because it was still cold out in March of that year. The heat was not at full blast by any means, but my car heats pretty well on the low setting. For the next couple of miles down the road, it was ice cold in the vehicle and the heat was on. But wait, there's more. About a week later, The same friend and I parked down on Colgate Road near where the road ends and a small park begins. We were looking for more clues as to what we may have seen. My friend and I walked towards the train tracks, and a fog rolled in from seemingly nowhere. It was so thick that seeing much of anything became a challenge, and yet down the tracks we could see a light. It was nearby, and looked like a lantern light almost. We turned and ran for the car, at which point I discovered upon turning the ignition that it was having trouble starting. It finally did after a few minutes. I've heard numerous theories about the Highway Q Phantom. That's what I named it, and what it might actually be. Some have said it was an accident victim from a crash, which I'm sure there have been a few along that stretch. Some have gone as far as saying that it was a fallen angel potentially, or an alien. Whatever the case, I would love to hear your input and theories. Thank you. Demon giving me nightmares. I'm in my 20s now, and this happened when I was around 14. I just found this website maybe a week ago and didn't think much of it. I was aware I could have posted this before, but I never did due to the fact that I felt I would be accused of having a fake story. But after reading some of the stories already on here and some of the comments, I feel maybe you guys can help me. So for spring break during my freshman year in high school, I stayed over at my uncle's house in Boston. After about a day of staying, he told me about this really cool colonial home he stayed in for a weekend and wanted to show me it. After about a 30-minute drive, we reached this huge brick house that just had that feeling to it. Kind of like the beginning of a horror movie or something. I was supposed to stay there for about 3 days and go back to his place, and I was okay with it. We weren't trespassing or anything. He said that he knew the owner and he has stayed there plenty of times. The first day wasn't anything bad. We got there late and mainly just toured around the area. But the first night was a lot worse than the day. I woke up in the middle of the night to voices I could hear in another room. It wasn't my uncle due to the fact that they were sleeping. I could hear him and his husband snoring on the floor below me. The voices were very faint. I kept trying to make out what they were saying, but I couldn't. I feel like I heard them saying things like, "Who's that person?" or "What are they doing here?" But as much as I think I heard that, I also think I was just hearing what I wanted to hear. It's hard to explain what I'm implying. The talking never stopped, and I ended up falling asleep while it was happening. In the morning of the second day, everything was fine. I didn't want to talk to my uncle about the night because they're very skeptical about a lot of that stuff and would probably just laugh at me. All 3 of the days were perfectly fine. We spent a lot of time outside talking and hanging out. The second night was interesting. I went to bed just fine, but I had a very scary nightmare. I was back at my actual house in my bedroom. I shared a bedroom with my brothers at the time, so the way it was designed was a twin bed on one side and a bunk bed on the other. I was sitting on the twin bed and across from me was this priest-looking guy holding a Bible. He seemed like he was reading some passage from it. I'm not that religious, so I don't know about the specifics. When he looked up from the reading, he didn't look at me. He looked at the bed I was on. But instead of looking at the foot where I was sitting, he was looking at the head of it. Then I turned to what he was looking at, and there was a pitch black figure sitting there. It felt so dark. I've never experienced such energy, I can't describe it. This feeling of fear instilled me in such a way that to this day, I have never felt it since. I look at the figure, and it turned its head back at me. The sound of the priest reading started to get muffled, and as I looked deep into this thing's face, I felt my chest constricting and my throat tightening. I was paralyzed in fear, and I could hear the priest screaming at the top of his lungs to leave me alone. I woke up after a few moments of this experience to silence. I looked around the room, recovering from this dream short of breath. I felt like I kept seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, but I feel like it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. After about 10 minutes of laying there, I accepted it was just a nightmare and fell back asleep no problem. The day went on, and the beginning of the last night was about to begin, which was the last straw for me. I told my uncle that I simply had a nightmare, and he just accepted it, as it wasn't a big focus for conversation. The third night was terrifying. I had the scariest nightmare I've ever had, and I can't express it enough. To this day, and right now as I type this, it still gives me the chills. I had a nightmare where I was in my kitchen at my actual home, and the figure was there again right next to me. It didn't say anything to me directly, but I knew what it was saying. "Let me show you something," was all it said. But said isn't a good word, like telepathically tell me? I don't know how to say it. But before my eyes, I was in darkness, and the location I was brought to was the most frightening thing I've ever seen. I don't want to describe it into too much detail, as it still makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, but I will say that this place it showed to me was so dark and so evil. No one, not even the most hated man alive, should ever have to experience such a punishment. I could feel myself in danger, and not the type of danger you're thinking of, like I was in trouble. I hate using the word, but I felt like my actual soul was in trouble. I woke up from this nightmare covered in sweat. My heart was racing, and I felt like I just fell out of a plane or something. I was sleeping in a queen-size bed at the home, and I slept on the side against the wall. I was facing the wall on my side, and I could just feel the side of the bed behind me sink down, as if someone had just sat there. I could hear heavy breathing, and I was paralyzed in fear. My face was pale and I couldn't scream. Nothing was working. After about 30 seconds, the bed went back to normal, and the side went back to normal. I didn't tell anyone about my experience the following day or the following week. I told my friends briefly about it at school, and they didn't think much of it and blew it off. It's not that they didn't believe me, I don't think they actually cared that much. I decided to post it on here because after reading a couple of the stories, I believe you guys can help me explain what this was. I've not experienced anything similar since.